of wine, cooked her favourite meal, and arranged the candles just so. He wanted everything to be perfect to show her how much he loved and cherished her. As he waited for her to arrive, Thomas couldn't help but smile to himself. He was lucky to have found someone like her. She was intelligent, kind, and the most beautiful person he had ever laid eyes on. From the moment he met her, he knew she was the one. He heard the clicking of her heels on the hardwood floor and quickly stood up to greet her. She looked stunning, as always, her long blonde hair cascading down her back, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She smiled at him, and he felt his heart skip a beat. "Hey," she said, leaning in for a kiss. "Hey," Thomas replied, pulling her in for a tight hug. As they sat down to dinner, Thomas couldn't help but feel like the luckiest man in the world. They laughed, talked, and shared stories. It was a perfect evening, one they would both remember for a long time. But as the night wore on, Thomas began to feel a sense of unease. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something felt off. He brushed it off, thinking he was just being paranoid. As they finished their meal, Thomas excused himself to kitchen to retrieve the dessert he had prepared. But as he opened the fridge, he couldn't believe what he saw. There, in bed with another man, was his girlfriend. He stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what he was seeing. His heart felt like it had been ripped out of his chest. Without a word, he dropped the dessert and walked out of the apartment, leaving her to explain herself. Thomas walked aimlessly through the city streets, his mind racing with a million thoughts. He couldn't understand how someone he loved and trusted could betray him like this. He felt like a fool for not seeing the signs, for being blinded by love. He found himself at the park, sitting on a bench, trying to make sense of it all. The sun had set, and the stars were beginning to twinkle in the sky. It was a beautiful night, but all Thomas could feel was pain and betrayal. He couldn't bring himself to go home, not yet, so he sat there, alone with his thoughts until the early hours of the morning. As the first rays of sunlight peeked through the trees, Thomas knew he had to face reality and go home. But as he entered the apartment, he couldn't bring himself to look at her. He packed a bag and left without a word, not wanting to hear any explanations or apologies. For weeks, Thomas wallowed in his pain and heartache. He couldn't eat, sleep, or even think straight. It felt like his whole world had come crashing down, and he didn't know how to pick up the pieces. But slowly, with the help of his friends and family, Thomas began to find the strength to move on. He realized that he couldn't let this one betrayal define his life. He deserved better, and he was determined to find it. He threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from the pain. And as the days passed, he began to feel a sense of hope and resilience. He started going out with friends, trying new things, and slowly building himself back up. One evening, as Thomas was walking home from work, he saw a flyer for a local art exhibit. He had always been interested in art, and he felt a sudden urge to check it out. As he walked through the exhibit, marveling at the different pieces, he came across a painting that caught his eye. It was a beautiful piece, full of colour and emotion. The title read, "Love in Ruins." As Thomas stood there, staring at the painting, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. He realized that even though his heart had been broken, it was still beating. He was still alive and capable of finding love and happiness again. He bought the painting and hung it in his apartment, a reminder of the strength he had found in the aftermath of betrayal. And as he stood there, admiring the painting, he knew that he would be okay. He had survived the ruins of love and had emerged stronger and wiser. Echoes of a Lost Chord by Thomas Miller. In the flourishing year of 1904, America was a nation on the brink of greatness, its ambitions charged with the electric promise of progress. Thomas, a humble man with a gentle soul, and Harriet, his vivacious wife, were the epitome of a love story penned by the hands of fate. They lived their lives in harmony, often finishing each other's sentences, their laughter blending seamlessly with the lively ragtime tunes filling their small town's air. However, as the winds of change brought whispers of prohibition, a looming era of sin and secrecy, so too did they usher in shadows that would eventually cloud their blissful union. The couple, once inseparable, found their bond tested as the 1920s roared into life. The world around them buzzed with new ideas and bold movements, but not all change was for the better. By the early 1930s, their marriage had become a facade, masking the painful truth of Harriet's affair with Herman, the neighbor next door. The gossip that once simmered in hushed tones now roared in the streets, and Thomas, caught in a tormenting love triangle, was pushed to the brink. In a fit of rage born from a broken heart, he committed the unthinkable, ending the lives of Harriet and Herman. Convicted and condemned, Thomas was imprisoned, his spirit as confined as his body. The years in his cell passed with the slow agony of a man who had lost everything. He was a shadow, a whisper among the other inmates, known yet unknowable. His grief and guilt were his only companions until, in a final act of despair, Thomas took his own life. His last agonized scream echoed through the prison corridors, a haunting reminder of his tragic end. Unbeknownst to Thomas, he left behind a son, Herbert, who had grown up in the cold embrace of an orphanage. When Herbert learned of his father's death, he wished for nothing more than to have known the man behind the name. As a mortician, Herbert took it upon himself to prepare his father's body, a solemn task that brought him no closure, only more questions. The funeral was a silent affair, attended only by Herbert and the lifeless form of the man he could never call father. As he mourned alone, a mysterious woman entered the funeral home. Her presence was as startling as it was intriguing: bright red hair, captivating eyes, and a sorrowful beauty. She introduced herself as Jez, Herbert's mother, and revealed her own hidden past with Thomas. All night, Herbert and Jez talked, unraveling the tangled threads of their family's history. Jez apologized for her absence, explaining the complexities and fears that kept her away. As dawn broke, Herbert realized that while he could never reclaim the years lost with his father, he could build something new with his mother. In the quiet aftermath of revelation, as he sat in his office surrounded by the tools of his trade, Herbert understood that love, though often born of pain, has the power to heal and transform. His life, once shadowed by his father's sins, now held the possibility of forgiveness and new beginnings. In the echo of a lost chord, Herbert found not just answers but also the chance to change the melody of his own life. Glowing Love of an Eternal Love by Thomas. Her groom Edgar stood at the end of the aisle, his face illuminated with pure adoration. The church was filled with the warm glow of candlelight, and the scent of fresh white roses wafted through the air. Lenore's heart fluttered as she approached Edgar, his smile growing wider with each step she took. She couldn't believe this was finally happening. After months of waiting, they were finally going to be married. It felt like a dream, and she was afraid that if she closed her eyes, she would wake up and find herself back in their small apartment, still waiting for this day to come. But as she reached the altar and took Edgar's hands in hers, she knew that this was real. This was her moment. Her happy ending. Nothing could take this away from her. The priest began the ceremony, his words a blur as Lenore gazed into Edgar's eyes. She didn't need to listen to the vows essay, she knew them by heart. She had dreamed of this day for so long, and now it was finally here. As the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Lenore felt tears of joy pricking at her eyes. She leaned in for their first kiss as a married couple, the cheers and claps of their loved ones filling the church. But just as their lips were about to meet, a loud cough echoed through the church, breaking the moment. Lenore opened her eyes to see her sister, Amelia, clutching her chest and struggling to catch her breath. "Are you okay?" Lenore asked, concerned. Amelia shook her head, her face pale. "I don't feel well," she managed to say before collapsing to the ground. Panic swept through the church as guests rushed to Amelia's side. Lenore's mother, a nurse, quickly assessed her and declared that they needed to get Amelia to a hospital immediately. Lenore's heart sank as she watched her sister being carried out of the church. She had been looking forward to having Amelia by her side on her special day, but now she was being taken away by a deadly illness. But Lena couldn't dwell on her sister's illness for long. She was a newlywed now, and it was time to celebrate with her husband. As they made their way to their reception, Lenore tried to push away thoughts of Amelia and focus on the happiness of the... But as the night went on, more and more guests began to fall ill. Some even had to leave the reception early, their faces pale and their bodies weak. Lenore couldn't help but feel guilty. Maybe she shouldn't have had the wedding during a pandemic, but she couldn't have predicted that it would become this severe. And besides, she and Edgar had waited so long to be married. They couldn't wait any longer. As the last guests left and the reception came to an end, Lenore and Edgar retired to their hotel room. As they lay in bed together, Lena couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. She knew that the Spanish flu was spreading rapidly, and she couldn't help but worry about her loved ones, especially her sister. But Edgar held her close and reassured her that everything would be okay. They were together now. But the next morning, Lenore woke up to find Edgar cold and unresponsive next to her. She shook him, calling his name, but he didn't stir. Panic consumed her as she realized that he was gone. Just like that, her happy ending was taken away from her. Lenore couldn't believe this was happening. She had finally found the love of her life, only to lose him on their wedding night. As she sat next to his lifeless body, tears streaming down her face, she couldn't help but think that this was just her luck. She had never been able to catch a break, and now, during a pandemic, she couldn't even have a happy ending. But she refused to let Edgar's death be in vain. She had to keep going. She made her way back to her family's home, where Amelia was still recovering from the flu. Lenore vowed to take care of her sister and help her get back on her feet. But as the days and weeks went by, the Spanish flu showed no signs of slowing down. It seemed like every day, more and more people were falling ill and dying. Lenore did her best to help in any way she could, but she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed and scared. Amelia's condition was improving, but Lenore knew that she couldn't stay with her forever. She had to find a way to support herself, especially now that she was alone and had no husband to rely on. She managed to find a job at a local factory, sewing masks and gowns for healthcare workers. It was hard work, but she was grateful to have a steady income. But every night, as she lay in bed alone, she couldn't help but think about Edgar. She missed him more than words could express, and she couldn't imagine ever finding love again. But then, one day, a man named William started working at the factory. He was kind and handsome, and Lenore couldn't help but feel drawn to him. They started talking and soon became friends, and eventually, William asked her out on a date. Lenore was hesitant at first. She didn't want to betray Edgar's memory. But William was persistent, and Lenore couldn't deny the feelings she had for him. Their date was magical, and for a brief moment, Lenore felt like she was truly happy again. But as they said their goodbyes, William told her that he had been feeling sick for the past few days. Lenore's heart sank. She couldn't bear to lose someone else to the Spanish flu. But as William leaned in to kiss her, she couldn't resist. A few days later, William's condition worsened, and he was taken to the hospital. Lenore feared the worst, but to her surprise, he recovered. She was overjoyed and grateful, and they began dating officially. But even in the midst of their new love, the Spanish flu continued to take its toll. Lenore's mother fell ill and passed away, leaving Lenore and Amelia to grieve yet another loss. But through it all, William stood by Lenore's side, supporting her and helping her in any way he could. And as they sat together, holding hands, she couldn't help but feel like she had found her happy ending once again. But the Spanish flu wasn't finished. It continued to ravage the world, taking more and more lives each day. And as the years went by, Lenore and William faced their own struggles. Financial hardships, the loss of loved ones, and the ever-present fear of the flu. But through it all, they were together. And for Lenore, that was enough. She had found her happy ending, even if it wasn't the one she had always dreamed of. Love she realized, was the one thing that could survive anything, even the Spanish flu. And as long as she had William by her side, she knew that she would be okay. Influenza forever, she thought with a smile on her face. Despite everything, they had found their forever in each other, and that was all that mattered. City of Desire by Thomas Miller. The fog hung heavily in the air, like a thick blanket of despair, muffling the soft laughter of the inhabitants of the city. She trudged along, her feet carrying her in search of something, though what, she could not. She was drawn to the city. There was something here that called to her, something that she was meant to find. Bridget had come to this city in search of something, though what it was she couldn't quite discern. All she knew was that it was something that had been lost, something that had been taken from her. She had been searching for a long time, but all she had found was darkness and despair. The city was alive with laughter and joy, yet Bridget could sense the tragedy that lurked beneath the surface. The joy of the people was a facade, a mask that they wore to protect themselves from the darkness that surrounded them. As she walked, she caught glimpses of the beauty that they had created in the face of such anguish and sorrow. The buildings of the city were sculptures crafted from marble and brick, reaching up into the sky. The streets were lined with cafes and shops, the smells of fresh pastries and coffee filling. But beneath the beauty of the city was a darkness that lurked, waiting to consume anyone who crossed its path. It was a world of horror and death, of secrets and pain, and of fear and terror. Bridget had come to this city to reclaim the thing that had been taken from her. She was searching for the thing that had stolen her vanity, her beauty, her life. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the city, scattering the fog and revealing the darkness that had been lurking beneath. In the distance, a tall figure stood, looming over the city like a dark sentinel. It was a creature of nightmarish proportions, with a face of pure anger and hatred. As the creature stepped forward, it seemed to be growing in size, its eyes glowing a deep red. It was a creature of horror, of nightmares come to life, and it was coming straight for Bridget. She stood, paralyzed with fear, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. She wanted to run, to get away from this monster, but her feet were glued to the ground. As it came closer, she could make out its features. It was clad in a cloak of black, its face twisted with rage. In one hand it held a flaming torch, which burned with a bluish-green flame. The creature approached her, its eyes never leaving her own. Its voice was deep and menacing, and it spoke with an unnatural accent. "You have been judged and found guilty. Tonight you will be burned in a fire of your own." The Dawn of the Reclaimed of the United States of America by Thomas Miller. In a world frayed at the edges, humanity teetered on the brink of oblivion. The economy had crumbled like ancient ruins under the weight of greed and corruption, leaving behind a society starved of both resources and hope. The once mighty pillars of law and order were now nothing more than echoes in the chaos that had engulfed the cities and towns. Amidst the smouldering remains of a civilization too arrogant to foresee its demise, two families, once bound by love and kinship, found themselves entrenched in a bitter struggle for survival. The Clarksons and the Millers, neighbours and friends for generations, had turned against each other in a world where trust was a forgotten currency. In the heart of the forsaken city, James Clarkson and his brother, Henry, stood in the shadow of a crumbling building, their faces hardened by loss and betrayal. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning hopes. "We must take what we can." "The Millers won't share, and there's nothing left to buy," Henry declared, his voice a hollow echo of desperation. Across the street, hidden in the debris-laden shadows, Sarah and Emily Miller whispered frantically. "The Clarksons are planning to raid our supplies tonight," Emily hissed, her eyes wide with fear. "We can't let them, not after what happened to Dad." The night fell like a curtain, shrouding the city in darkness and dread. As the moon cast a pale light over the broken streets, a silent signal passed between the brothers. With weapons forged from the remnants of a once prosperous world, they advanced towards the Millers' sanctuary, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. The confrontation was inevitable. As the Clarksons breached the entrance, the air was split by the sound of gunfire. Shouts filled the night, a tragic symphony of anger and sorrow. Sarah and Emily, cornered and frightened, fought with the ferocity of those with everything to lose. In the aftermath, the street was eerily quiet, disturbed only by the soft whimpering of the wounded and the defeated. James lay on the ground, staring at the starless sky, his life ebbing away. Beside him, Henry clutched a fatal wound, his breath shallow and laboured. Sarah, limping and battered, approached the brothers, her eyes not angry, but empty. "Look at us," she whispered, more to herself than to the dying men before her. "What have we become?" The morning sun rose over a city that no longer woke up, its light touching the faces of those who had lost everything to hatred and fear. As the days passed, the remnants of humanity dwindled, leaving behind echoes of a world that could have been. In the end, when the dust settled and the silence became unbearable, those who remained understood the grim truth: the economy was not the only thing that had collapsed. Humanity had crumbled right along with it. In their quest for survival, they had forsaken the very essence of what it meant to live. And so, as the last pages of their story were written in the ashes of despair, the survivors pondered the legacy of a world where the way out was indeed death, a legacy of caution and sorrow for whoever, or whatever, might one day inherit the earth. As weeks morphed into months, the remnants of civilization clung to existence, the stark new reality rendering every remaining heartbeat a cacophony of fear, guilt and despair. Sarah Miller, once a schoolteacher brimming with optimism, had become a custodian of dwindling supplies and fading memories. Her sister Emily, injured in the skirmish that had claimed the lives of their neighbours and kin, lay bedridden, a constant reminder of the high cost of survival. In a nearby ruin that once served as a community centre, a frail assembly of survivors convened. Desperation had drawn them together not as friends nor allies, but as co-conspirators against the relentless tide of doom. Among them was Michael, a former economist, whose deep understanding of their collapsed world offered no solace but only deeper chasms of despair. Money. The economy, it was all a construct of perceived value, Michael explained, his voice barely rising above a whisper. We believed in a system so deeply that it defined our very existence, but without belief, without the mutual trust that our paper and numbers held value, it all fell apart. His audience, gaunt faces shadowed by the flickering light of a lone candle, listened not out of interest, but out of a sheer, morbid need to grasp the intangible threads that had led to their unravelling. Outside, the streets of what was once a bustling neighbourhood were silent, save for the occasional howl of a stray dog or the distant crash of another structure succumbing to neglect. The cityscape was a mausoleum of human achievement, a testament to what happens when societal constructs fail and the baser instincts of survival override all else. Lucy, a young mother who had lost her entire family to disease and starvation, spoke up, her voice shaky. "What are we even surviving for? There's no law, no order. Just this," she gestured around at the crumbling walls, "this endless waiting for an end." It was a sentiment echoed in the hollow stomachs and hollow eyes around her. The concept of future had become a cruel joke, and death, once feared, was now courted as an old, inevitable friend. As the meeting disbanded, each returned to their solitary existences, fortifying their shelters not against the elements, but against each other. Trust had become the most valuable and scarce resource. No one spoke of rebuilding. Survival was the only item on any agenda. Days were filled with scavenging among the ruins, where the most valuable finds were not food or water, but things that could be weaponized. Nights were restless vigils, where every shadow and sound signified potential doom. Sarah, returning to her makeshift home, looked over at Emily, whose once vibrant eyes now seldom opened. Whispered conversations about death, their fear, their inevitable acceptance, had become their lullabies. "It's like we're waiting for the world to end again, even though it already has," Emily murmured one evening, a lucid moment in a sea of pain. Sarah held her sister's hand, thinking about the brothers Clarkson, about their own parents, about every familiar face that had faded into memory. The world hadn't ended with a bang or a cataclysm, but with whispers, betrayals, and the slow, inexorable decay of everything that had once held meaning. As the world darkened into another night, the air thick with the scent of rain and ruin, Sarah looked out at the empty streets, a tableau of the apocalypse that was both a graveyard and a cradle. Maybe, just maybe, the end wasn't just about death and despair. Maybe it was about what comes after, about who rises from the ashes and what they choose to rebuild. But tonight, like every night, the only certainty was the darkness, and the only companions were ghosts of a world that had once dreamed of forever. As autumn bled into winter, the chill that seeped into the bones of the city's remnants was not just from the encroaching cold, but from the deepening realization that the vestiges of the old world were finally flickering out. In this new era of endless dusk, the survivors faced not only the external decay of their environment, but the internal decay of their spirits and morals. Sarah, whose nightly vigils by Emily's side had become her entire world, noticed the change one bleak morning. Emily, her body ravaged by infections and lack of proper care, finally succumbed to the relentless grip of her ailments. Her passing was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos that had defined their lives for so long. In the silence that followed her sister's last breath, Sarah felt a shift, a fracture in her resolve that threatened to dismantle what little fortitude she had left. Alone now, Sarah ventured out more frequently, driven by a need for human connection that her sister's presence had partially sated. On one such foray, she stumbled upon a gathering of survivors who were attempting to start a council to establish some semblance of order. Among them was Michael, whose theories about the economy and society she remembered all too well. "We need to rebuild, not just survive," Michael was saying, his voice infused with a passion that seemed almost out of place in the bleak landscape. "We can create a new system, one based on mutual aid, shared responsibilities. We have the chance to redefine what it means to be a community." His words stirred something in Sarah, a flicker of hope that she thought had died with Emily. She joined the council, throwing herself into the task of rebuilding with a fervor that surprised even her. The group was small, but their ambitions were large. They cleared debris, planted what few seeds they had managed to scavenge, and set up patrols to ensure their small enclave remained safe. As weeks turned into months, their small settlement began to take shape. They had established a rudimentary barter system, and slowly, as if awakening from a long slumber, the streets around them began to show signs of life. Children played among the ruins, their laughter a balm to the weary hearts of their elders. But the world outside their fledgling community remained hostile. Other groups, driven by desperation and guided by less altruistic leaders, saw Sarah's community not as a beacon of hope, but as a threat to their own survival. Raids became frequent, and the patrols often returned bearing not only scars but also tales of increasing brutality. One night, a particularly violent group attacked. The battle was fierce, and many of Sarah's friends fell. The attackers were repelled, but the cost was high. The community's spirit was fractured, and fear once again took root. In the aftermath, as they buried their dead, Sarah stood over the fresh graves, her heart heavy with grief. She realized that while they had tried to build something new, the shadows of the old world, the greed, the violence, the despair still clung to them, stubborn and yielding. Michael approached her, his face etched with sorrow. "Maybe we were too optimistic," he admitted. "But we can't give up. Not while there's still a chance to make this right." Sarah looked around at the battered faces of her community, at the children who had known nothing but ruin, and felt a resolve steal within her. "No," she said firmly. "We won't give up. We'll rebuild, and we'll learn. We'll make a world worth living in, not just surviving." And so, with determined hearts, they set about repairing their enclave, strengthening their defences and deepening their bonds. They understood now that the path to rebuilding was fraught with challenges, both from within and without, but they were committed to forging a new path through the desolation, to create a spark of civilization in a world that had seen too much darkness. In the heart of what was once the bustling, expansive nation of the United States, the remnants of society struggled beneath the shadow of its former glory. The great cities that had housed millions and fostered dreams of innovation and prosperity were now skeletal frameworks, haunting reminders of a fallen epoch. Amidst this backdrop, Sarah's community, nestled in the ruins of a city that once thrived as a beacon of commerce and culture, represented a flicker of hope amidst widespread desolation. As winter thawed into a grudging spring, the community's efforts at self-governance began to crystallize into something resembling the democratic foundations upon which the old country was built. They held meetings in the shell of a municipal building, its walls covered in vines and its floors a mosaic of shattered glass and resilience. Here they debated not just their survival strategies, but the ethos of their new society. It was in these debates that the true challenge of their endeavor emerged, not merely to survive, but to reflect on what had led humanity to this brink. We're not just rebuilding homes, we're laying the groundwork for a future where this Michael gestured broadly at the ruins around them doesn't happen again. Sarah took up a role that felt part educator, part leader, prompting her fellow survivors to consider the past critically. "We have to look at what led us here," she insisted during one of their assemblies. Our reliance on a system that valued profit over people, our blind belief in endless growth on a finite planet, our divisions that were exploited for political gain, these were our downfalls. Their community, though small, began to attract more survivors, drawn by stories of a place where people were trying to do more than just scrape by. These new members brought with them skills, stories, and occasionally stark reminders of the ongoing struggles outside the relative safety of their enclave. One evening, as the community gathered to share a meal made from the first harvest of their communal garden, an elderly man, who had travelled from the west, shared his journey. Across the plains, communities are taking shape, each struggling with these same issues. Some choose isolation, fearing the outside, others form alliances, but all face the spectre of past mistakes, looming large. This revelation sparked a new initiative within the community education, not just in practical skills but in history, ethics and governance. Sarah started organizing sessions where children and adults alike could learn about the history of their nation, the environmental degradation, the economic disparities, and the cultural conflicts that had fractured their society. "We must understand the past fully if we are to avoid repeating it," she often said. As the community grew, so did their capabilities. They established a library from salvaged books, a workshop for rebuilding old technologies, and a council that rotated leadership to prevent the accumulation of power. The principle of transparency governed all their decisions, a direct response to the secretive dealings that had characterized the last days of the old government. News of their progress spread, and with it came new challenges. Some neighboring groups viewed their prosperity as a threat, leading to tensions that tested their commitment to their ideals. Yet, each conflict was also an opportunity for dialogue, and slowly some of those who once threatened the community joined it, swayed by its ideals and inclusiveness. In this new world, Sarah and her companions discovered that the true foundation of a society is not its economy or its laws, but the shared commitment of its people to uphold values of fairness, sustainability, and respect for all life. As they built, learned, and grew, they sowed the seeds not just for survival, but for a renaissance of the principles upon which their old nation once proudly stood, hoping this time to avoid the pitfalls that had led to its demise. As the community solidified its foundation and expanded its influence, the concept of a renaissance began to transform from a hopeful idea into a tangible reality. Sarah's small enclave became a model of sustainable living and democratic governance, inspiring surrounding settlements to adopt similar principles. This network of communities, each autonomous yet united in their core values, began to refer to themselves as the Federation of Reclaimed States, a coalition intent on restoring order and humanity from the ashes of the old United States. The Federation emphasized a return to simpler, sustainable practices that prioritized environmental stewardship and social equality over the unbridled industrial expansion that had marked the previous era. The rise of the Federation did not go unnoticed. Across the continent, fragmented remnants of the old government and other powerful groups, who had survived the collapse by hoarding resources and exerting militaristic control over territories, saw this new political entity as a threat to their dominion. These groups often operated under a guise of restoring order, but their methods were rooted in the oppressive systems of the past. As tensions escalated, Sarah found herself at the heart of diplomatic efforts, traveling between communities to negotiate alliances and mediate conflicts. Her reputation as a thoughtful leader, committed to ethical rebuilding, made her a respected figure in the post-apocalyptic landscape. During one critical summit held in the ruins of what was once a Capitol building, Sarah addressed a gathering of leaders from various factions. "Our survival thus far has depended on our ability to adapt and change," she stated. "We cannot afford to revert to the ideologies that led us here: corruption, exploitation, and division. We must forge a new path, one that sees our interdependence as a strength, not a weakness." Her words, while inspiring to many, also incited resistance from those who clung to the old ways. A faction led by a former military commander named General Carter proposed an alternative vision, one that relied on a strict hierarchical system to maintain control. "Chaos is the true enemy," Carter argued. "Without a strong hand to guide them, people will inevitably return to savagery." The ideological divide threatened to fracture the fragile peace that had been established. However, Sarah and her allies worked tirelessly to counteract these divisive narratives by demonstrating the successes of their community-driven model. They organized exchanges between communities where people could share knowledge, resources, and cultural stories, thereby weaving a tapestry of mutual respect and understanding. Over time, the Federation's influence grew, and its successes became too evident to ignore. Communities under the sway of autocratic leaders began to question their rulers, spurred by the prosperity and freedom observed in neighboring Federation states. This grassroots pressure gradually eroded the power of authoritarian enclaves, leading to a series of peaceful transitions and some less peaceful uprisings. Sarah, witnessing the transformation of a continent, knew that the road ahead would still be fraught with challenges. The environmental damage of the past centuries was severe, and the global climate crisis continued to impact weather patterns, crop yields, and water supplies. The Federation therefore prioritized ecological rehabilitation projects, investing in renewable energy sources and regenerative agriculture techniques. Years passed, and the landscape of the continent began to shift both literally, as reforestation projects took root, and figuratively, as new cultural and political ideas blossomed. Sarah, older now but invigorated by the changes she had helped usher in, reflected on the journey. "We started with a simple goal to survive," she told a group of young leaders during a mentorship session. "But survival is just the beginning. To truly thrive, we must envision a world that rectifies the mistakes of the past and embraces the diversity and vitality of life in all its forms." As the Federation prepared to celebrate its 20th anniversary, Sarah looked out over a vibrant assembly, a mosaic of faces from many walks of life, all united by a common dream of a reborn nation, guided by wisdom, compassion, and an unyielding commitment to the greater good. Her heart swelled with hope, not just for her community, but for the future of humanity itself. 20 years after its humble beginnings, the Federation of Reclaimed States stood as a beacon of hope and resilience. The once scattered and desolate towns had transformed into thriving hubs of community and innovation, each contributing uniquely to the collective prosperity. The grand celebration of the Federation's anniversary was not just a reflection of survival, but a testament to the enduring spirit of human collaboration and creativity. As the day of the celebration dawned, representatives from every corner of the Federation gathered in the great central square, rebuilt from the remnants of an old metropolis. The square was alive with colour and sound, filled with art installations, music and dance, all expressions of the diverse cultures that had merged together in this new era. Sarah, now revered as one of the founders of the Federation, took the stage to address the multitude. Her hair had silvered, but her eyes retained the intense passion that had driven her all those years ago. As she looked out over the crowd, her heart was full of emotion, seeing not just faces, but the embodiment of a dream realized, a dream of a society built on the principles of equality, respect, and sustainability. "My friends," Sarah began, her voice clear and strong, echoing across the square, "today we celebrate not the end of hardship, but the strength to overcome it. We have built more than just buildings and roads. We have woven a fabric of society that values every thread, no matter its color or texture." She paused, allowing her words to resonate, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "We stand here today as proof that from the ashes of the old world, a new world can rise, one that learns from the past and looks to the future with unwavering hope. We have faced darkness, despair, and division, but together, we have turned those trials into the foundation of something truly magnificent." Around her, digital screens displayed images of the Federation's achievements, lush green spaces that had replaced barren wastelands, schools that offered education to every child, and community centers that ensured no one was left to fend for themselves. The screens also showed projects in progress, like the restoration of natural habitats and the expansion of clean energy facilities. But let us not become complacent, Sarah continued, her voice imbuing every word with urgency. Our work does not end with what we have built. It continues every day in how we live, how we treat each other, and how we care for our planet. We are the stewards of this earth, and it is our duty to ensure that the generations to come inherit a world not of scarcity and fear, but of abundance and peace. The crowd erupted into applause, a powerful wave of sound that seemed to carry all the hopes and promises of the day. Sarah stepped back, allowing other leaders to share their visions for the future, each voice adding to the chorus of a unified dream. As the sun set on the celebration, the sky ablaze with hues of orange and pink, lanterns were released into the sky, each one carrying a message of hope written by a citizen of the Federation. Watching them float upward, Sarah felt a profound connection to the past and future, a bridge between what had been and what could be. The Federation, once just a fragile hope amid chaos, had become a testament to humanity's capacity for rebirth and redemption. In the faces of the children watching the lanterns drift into the twilight, Sarah saw the true victory of their endeavors, not the silencing of discord, but the creation of harmony. As the stars began to pepper the sky, Sarah whispered to the wind, "From darkness we have crafted light. May it guide us forever onward with that." The celebrations continued into the night, a vibrant symphony of life and joy, echoing the unbreakable spirit of a reborn nation. Discover the unique world of Thomas Miller with NFT books. Dive into the exclusive collection of poems and stories by the acclaimed author, Thomas Miller, available only at NFT books. Experience the magic of literature like never before through the innovative platform of NFT books, where each piece is a treasure waiting to be unlocked. Oh, Where Have Our Kids Gone? By Thomas Miller. Oh, where have our kids gone? In the streets they stray and roam. Defiant eyes cast shadows, in twilight zones they call home. Their laughter once as clear as bells, now echoes faint and hollow. For they march to somber drumbeats, down paths too dark to follow. In the grasp of unseen tempests, they spiral down so deep, into nightmares of their making, where angels fear to creep. Rebellion's fire brands their hearts, with each wild, reckless flight. They dance upon the precipice, in the fading edge of light. Yet amidst this chaos brewing, there stands a hopeful few, whose spirits have not faltered, whose hearts remain as true. To these gentle souls, blessed be, your journey is not forlorn. May love's light guide your pathway, like the breaking of the morn. For you who hold the future, in the cradle of your hands, may you foster seeds of kindness across these troubled lands. Raise children with the courage to counteract the night, to be beacons through the darkness, to bear the torch of right. So, oh, where have our kids gone? It's for us to lead the way, to guide them back from precipices into the warmth of day, where each child may find refuge in love's enduring nest, to rise as fathers, mothers by such grace, we shall be blessed. Forever in his heart, a love story of Thomas and Morgana. Thomas had always been a simple man. He grew up in a small town, and his life had been nothing out of the ordinary. But when he met Morgana, everything changed. Morgana was a beautiful and talented singer, and Thomas fell for her the moment he heard her voice. They quickly became inseparable and soon decided to get married. Their wedding was a grand affair, with family and friends coming from far and wide to celebrate their love. Morgana looked stunning in her white dress, and Thomas felt like the luckiest man in the world. During the reception, Morgana took to the stage to sing a song she had written just for Thomas. As she sang, her voice filled the room with a haunting melody that left everyone spellbound. Thomas watched his bride with pride, his heart bursting with love. But then, in the middle of the song, something went horribly wrong. Morgana's voice faltered, and she clutched at her chest. Thomas could see the panic in her eyes as she collapsed to the floor. In an instant, the joyous celebration turned into chaos. Thomas rushed to Morgana's side, holding her in his arms and screaming her name. He could feel her fading away, slipping from his grasp. Morgana's last words were a whisper, barely audible above the commotion. "I love you, Thomas," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Always and forever." And then she was gone. Thomas was inconsolable. He retreated to his mansion, shutting himself off from the world. For weeks he cried and mourned, reliving every moment he had ever spent with Morgana. But as time passed, Thomas realized that he couldn't keep living in the past. He knew that Morgana would want him to keep living his life and finding joy in the world. And so, he picked himself up and moved forward, cherishing the memories of his sweet Morgana and keeping her love close to his heart. Unspoken love, a tribute to Thomas. Thomas had been in love with Jess for as long as he could remember. They had been friends since they were kids, but he always wanted more. He was afraid to tell her, worried that it would ruin their friendship if she didn't feel the same way. Despite his feelings, Thomas tried his best to suppress them and enjoy their time together as friends. He loved being around her, even if it meant he couldn't be with her the way he truly wanted. One summer day, while out on a hike in the mountains, tragedy struck. Thomas stumbled and fell from a steep ledge, suffering severe injuries. He was rushed to the hospital, but the damage was too great, and he passed away that night. Jess was devastated by the news. She had no idea how much Thomas meant to her until he was gone. She had always felt a deep connection with him, but she had never realized just how much she cared for him until it was too late. That night, as she lay in bed, Jess could hear Thomas's voice in her head. She remembered all the times they had spent together, laughing and talking, and she realized just how much he had meant to her. As the tears flowed down her cheeks, Jess screamed out into the night for her loss. She wished she could have told Thomas how much she loved him before it was too late. She wished she could have been with him in his final moments, to hold his hand and tell him that she cared for him too. But it was too late now. Thomas was gone, and all Jess could do was grieve. She vowed to never take the people she loved for granted again, and to always tell them how she felt. She didn't want to live with regret like she did now. As the days passed, Jess slowly began to heal. She knew that Thomas would want her to be happy, and so she did her best to honor his memory. She never forgot the lessons he taught her about love and friendship, and she carried those with her always. The True Feeling of Being Truly Alone, by Thomas Miller. Chapter 1, The Silent Nights. Could this be the real story of author Thomas Miller? A tale that tugs at the heartstrings and immerses you in the depths of solitude. A story of pain, isolation, and the yearning for connection. The Florida summer wraps itself around me like a suffocating blanket, a relentless and oppressive heat that seeps into every corner of my being. The nights are no different. They oscillate between a stifling stillness and a humid, clinging warmth that offers no respite. Each evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, a quiet terror settles in my chest. The loneliness becomes palpable, a silent scream echoing in the stillness. My name is Giles Bloomingfeld, and this is my story. It is a story of solitude, a journey through the dark corridors of isolation, and the search for a connection that seems perpetually out of reach. I cry out for someone to hear me, to acknowledge my existence, but my cries are swallowed by the oppressive night. The hot air outside lacks the fury and anger I feel within. My anger is a storm, a raging tempest, but it is a storm that is met with indifference. I fear dying alone in this room, in this house. The thought that no one would notice my absence, that I would simply fade away without a trace, is a fear that grips me with icy fingers. I am afraid of life, afraid of death, afraid of everything in between. Rejection is a knife that cuts deep, and I have felt it sting too many times to count. The first have not known the touch of another human being for 29 years. 29 years without love, without intimacy, without the warmth of another soul beside me. I have friends, or at least people I call friends. They are acquaintances, drifting in and out of my life like ghosts. They will forget about me, I know they will. They will move on, their lives continuing without a hitch, while I am left to wonder if anyone would look for me if I vanished. I bet not. The only true companion I have is my dog, Velvet. Velvet is my world, my anchor in this turbulent sea of loneliness. She is the greatest dog, a loyal friend who never forgets, never judges. She is always there, her presence a balm to my wounded soul. A dog's love is pure, untainted by the complexities and betrayals of human relationships. Velvet's unconditional love is a lifeline, a reminder that I am not completely alone. My neighbour, Brennan, often says, "A dog is a great thing in the world, he is right." Velvet is my comfort, my confidant, my only source of warmth in a world that has turned its back on me. Chapter 2, The Disappearing Act. The world keeps spinning, indifferent to my suffering. People come and go, their lives intersecting with mine briefly before they move on, leaving me in the shadows. Those who were once close, who promised to be there, have drifted away. They were never truly there to begin with, their presence an illusion, their promises empty. I see them sometimes, these ghosts of my past. They move through life with ease, their smiles bright, their laughter carefree. They have families, careers, futures. I watch them from a distance, a silent observer of a world that has no place for me. Their happiness feels like a mockery, a cruel reminder of everything I have lost, everything I will never have. Fake people they are. Their kindness was always a facade, their concern a mask. They were never truly my friends, never truly cared. When I needed them the most, they vanished into the night, leaving me to face my demons alone. Their betrayal is a wound that never heals, a constant ache that reminds me of my own inadequacy. Chapter 3, The Unchanging World. The world is full of people like them, people who pretend to care but never do.